everyone, my name is Laura and this is Our Class Expert Talks. You made a great choice choosing to watch this video, so let's begin. When it comes to the operation side of air cargo, we have a lot of structure and processes. For example, if goods are time sensitive in terms of delivery, they must be shipped in an extremely organized fashion. And that requires a lot of planning and understanding how each of the air cargo components work on its own and together. Understanding the processes from beginning to end can be extremely beneficial. And in today's talk, we have someone who can describe the A to Z of air cargo. In today's expert talk, I am joined by our class instructor, leadership, high performance coach, air freight and logistics business consultant, Sadiya Khan. So thank you very much, Sadiya, for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Laura.
I'm very glad that you're here. We're going to have a great discussion, I'm sure. But let's not wait any longer and just get right into it, because I'm sure people that are watching want to get to know you better and they want to pick your brain a little bit with my help. So let's begin with the very beginning of your career. So how did you find yourself in aviation and where did it all begin?
Wow, okay. So I sort of fell into aviation, I think is the right way of framing that. So aviation is not something that I planned from when I was 5 years old. When you're 5 and people come up to you and go, "Oh yeah, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Often people have got all sorts of answers, and a lot of people are like, "Well, I don't really know," and that's okay too. But it's not something that I kind of came up with and wrote on my diary at school. I'd love to go into air cargo. This is going to be my future. I didn't even know it existed, to be honest with you. It literally is something that I fell into. So I was very lucky to stumble across it. I got a job, my first job after my postgraduate studies in the aviation sector. And actually I was in the passenger side initially. And then this opportunity came along in air cargo, in freight, and it called to me because I've got an economics background, and when I started this position in air cargo, I found out that I was like, oh, I love this, because it was all about world trade. To me, it was all about world trade. It was all about how we move things from one place to another. And it goes through all sorts of processes in between in order to be able to do that. And at the end of it is the consumer who's buying things in a shop, maybe, or getting something delivered to their home, as we see more and more of these days. So to answer your question, I fell into it, but then I fell in love with it when I finally did find it.
And this romance between you and aviation, was it gradual, or was there a day when you kind of went to work and then you realized that, yes, this is it, this is what I want to do?
I don't know. I guess there wasn't a specific day that I can remember. I mean, there's a beautiful quote that I always think about, which is, we remember moments, not necessarily days. So I couldn't tell you, it was the 17th of January on, that was the day that it all happened. But at the same time, I guess it must have been a gradual thing where, just being exposed to it more and more and seeing the industry from so many more angles, it just kind of layered itself one on top of the other. And I just kind of built this love from the ground upwards, if you like. I guess it was a gradual thing where the more I found out about it, the more it intrigued me. The more curious I became about it, the more I kind of went, oh wow, well, how does that work? And that bit fits into that, and and then you just you get the excitement, you get the adrenaline going inside of you, and all of a sudden you find yourself fully submerged in the whole thing.
Well, that sounds really nice. So let's get into it then. Your assignments, I'm sure you've had many over your career. Is there anything that stands out, something that you're really proud of, or is there a project that you would love to do all over again?
Oh, great question. There are many pieces that stand out from a learning point of view in terms of understanding the industry and the processes more, from the people point of view, where I just got to meet and interact with so many excellent and smart people. But also from a personal point of view, you know, in terms of personal growth as well. So it's hard to pick in that sense, to keep the question concise, or my answer concise, I should say. But there were definitely projects where I was exposed to lots of different areas of the business, or the businesses that I worked within, where I had to bring together lots of different elements, like, you know, how does the booking process work? How do we interact with our operations team? How does revenue management work? How does capacity control work? How do we put all of these things together in terms of customer service and customer experience? And then how do we create operations which are completely brand new, or even more efficient than they were before, or even processes that didn't exist before? How do we put those in places? So the projects that stand out in my mind call on all of those things, where I've had to kind of learn a lot, but also bring a lot of things together in order to kind of create something new and even better. So, you know, absolutely, would love to do those sorts of things again, but also, and I suppose that's why we're here to talk today as well, I would love to be able to kind of hand that over to somebody else through teaching and learning, for them to understand all of those experiences that I've had, in order for them to be able to go off and do those sorts of projects too. From a personal point of view, you know, through my career, I've been able to move country, you know, for a particular opportunity in the Middle East, and that taught me a huge amount, just to kind of set up a whole brand new life in a week, and then contribute to a really large organization, you know, a large cargo operator, and all the brilliant things that I learned over there as well. So that was wonderful. And then on the people side, just interacting with so many different cultures across the boundaries, managing the teams that I was so privileged to lead, and to work with, and for us to be able to achieve all the things that we did. So I hope that sort of answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that you mentioned people again, because I think over these expert talks, we kind of established the fact that aviation is people's business, and no way other. And you are also a leadership and high performance coach. So you also encounter, you know, a lot of different people with their different mindsets and, you know, different approaches to their career and personal life. And you're actively encouraging people, especially in your social media, to be confident, reflect, and pay attention to their mental and physical health. So what are the main issues that people face in aviation, and how do they overcome these challenges?
Our industry is so it's so what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable, in a sense. It's so vulnerable in that, you know, anything external happens and all of a sudden we're in chaos, aren't we? So we're at the risk of volcanoes, you know, the weather systems changing, and all of a sudden we have to ground aircraft, you know, all of a sudden we have to fly different routes, all of a sudden we have to find different ways of doing things. The political scene, you know, everything that happens on the outside seems to kind of really directly and quite harshly impact our industry. So the ability to have flexibility, the ability to have that resilience to kind of get up and go, okay, all right, so this has happened. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to do that? And doing that as a team, you know, pulling together as a team to be able to do that is what gives companies the competitive advantage to be able to get through those situations. Absolutely on a, you know, that's on a kind of corporate level, on a company level, on a business level, but definitely down to the individual level. You know, you talk about well-being as well. The people challenges, of course, we've had the pandemic, which has pushed everybody into their houses, into their flats, into their residences, where they've had to basically log on to computers, laptops, as we're doing today, and now function and live their work lives through this screen rather than through the interactions of the office and all of the benefits that come from talking to human beings in person. And that's been a massive challenge for a lot of people. On the one hand, there's a benefit to it because people have been able to run the rest of their lives, I suppose, a bit easier, because all of a sudden you cut out the 2-hour commute, or you're able to kind of gain some time back in your day. But on the other hand of that, how does team cohesion now work? How do I feel part of something which is going somewhere as a business? How do I really buy into the strategy and feel like I'm contributing and I have a purpose every day? They're much harder things for people to get to grips with, I think, during the pandemic. And so therefore the wellness element was, talking about how do I now create the boundaries for myself? Because before, the boundaries were, well, I leave my front door and now I'm going to work, and then I leave my work and now I'm coming back home again. Whereas now I open my laptop and then I close my laptop, and I'm still in the same four walls. So where do I take my breaks? Should I take a break? Is this weird feeling of guilt hanging around me all the time that I should be logged on when actually I should actually not be logged on? So yeah, lots of challenges from a well-being point of view for the individual, but also on a company level to understand that.
Are there any advantages that people gained with this whole change after the pandemic? Especially, you mentioned again that we cut off the commute, right? So that gives us extra time in our day to do whatever we want. Is there anything else that might have helped people over this time?
I think loads of advantages as well. I mean, I heard it called the other day COVID bonuses, which I found quite interesting. So I think that there are definitely good things that have come out of this quite difficult situation, and they look a little bit like people rediscovering like the whole of themselves. Meaning, in coaching we talk a lot about the kind of wheel of life, if you like, and one slice of the wheel of life is very much career, but there's a whole other part of you as well, which is about what you do in your personal time, your family, your hobbies, your interests, and that's what makes up all of you. And I think forcing us to get back into our houses has actually opened up some doors in our minds to say, well, actually, no, there's a lot of other things that I quite enjoy doing as well. And actually, I quite enjoy taking my children to school, if that's something that people have in their lives, or I quite like going and having some time with my friends. So all of a sudden, people have kind of realised that there's more. That there's more than just this slice that I need to concentrate on. And I think that has enabled them to maybe contribute more into their lives because they've realised that actually life is not just about work, but also in doing that, in taking a break from work and being apart from it for a while, you actually end up being able to contribute even better at work when you're there. So, because when you're at work all the time, if you're just hammering it 24/7, not taking any breaks, you can't get the best of yourself in that way. You have to be able to, the brain needs it actually. The brain needs to be able to take a break from something in order to come back and then be the best of you in that space again. So I think that's definitely been a bonus in the sense that people have realised that there's a lot more to life. But actually that has in some ways enabled a lot of people to give more into work when they're in work.
That's wonderful. I mean, I feel inspired now, knowing, that there's still some benefits that I had. But let's talk about you again, but let's move to teaching now, because obviously you are an instructor at our class and you have your own virtual class, which we're going to talk about a bit later on. But let's talk about teaching. Do you remember your first teaching experience and how did you get into it?
Yeah, okay. So that one I do remember. So the last question you asked me about, did I come on this kind of into aviation gradually, or was it a specific day? I found that a bit more like gradual. But on this one, there was a particular day actually. So I'll talk about that. But it's not. It's probably a bit of a curveball in the sense that I ended up somehow teaching a class of 6 to 7 year olds, I would say. I was trying to figure out what age they were, but I think they were about 6 to 7. I'm not sure how this quite came about, but basically it was in my daughter's preschool. Yeah, I ended up going in and teaching them about a particular topic, and it was purely voluntary. But I remember preparing a lot for that. And I remember really enjoying preparing for that. And I was really kind of putting things together with props and with slides and with, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, these 6 to 7 year olds are going to think that they're in some sort of business meeting. I was like, maybe I've gone too corporate on this, but I thought, I was talking to the head teacher and I was like, well, I'll just give it a go and see what happens. And and then so we got into that space and, we went through the topic and there was a huge amount of engagement for them, like hands shooting up in the air, and we were asking questions and I was answering questions, and I got them to like try on things, and 6 to 7 year olds, you've got to get a bit more kind of interactive like that in the days when of course we were allowed in the classrooms as well. So I came away from that experience and I was like, I loved that, just the element of imparting knowledge, taking knowledge and packaging it in a way which is going to be effective, and for somebody to be engaged in, and for somebody to come away from that session knowing a little bit more than they went into that session with. So that was my first experience of teaching, in that I was teaching a lot of children, but that made me that something inside me kind of went like that, and I kind of went, I love the idea of passing information on and being able to help somebody else to be able to do something even better in their lives. And that just transposes across to adults. We're all learning all the time. I have a very deep belief about lifelong learning. I don't think it ever stops. It's not like you get to 18 and go, oh yeah, I know everything now, I'm done. I don't need to know anything else. No way. I think you're always learning, and when you're always open to learning, you can really have some wonderful experiences. So I take all of those learnings in my little classroom of 6 to 7 year olds and think about taking that into what I now do as well, in terms of passing information on into an adult classroom setting. But for me, the main thing is effective information transfer. There's no point just kind of standing at the front and just doing a massive monologue where people kind of come away a little bit, a little bit down and a little bit out. It's all about how do we get these messages across so that they will stick. And that's all about human behaviour, which is why it gels so much with my coaching practice, because that's all about human behaviour as well.
And do you feel like when you are teaching, you're kind of learning yourself new things as well? Does that
100%.
How it works?
Yeah, 100%. Right, we're all learning. I've got a bank of information, and we've packaged it up in segments so that it's organized, so that I'm not just sort of standing up in the front and just talking about all the things that I've done in the past. It's actually organized in a sense that we'll go through this and we'll go through this and go through this. But of course there'll be questions that come up, and it will make me scratch my head and go, well, okay, well, let's find out a little bit more about that. Or it will stimulate another thought in my mind, which I'd go off and find out a little bit more about, or just bring it together in another way. But definitely, we're always learning all the time, and I think the more open we can be to that, the more we can actually get more from each other.
Wonderful. Let's talk about your course then, Sadiya. Actually, you have a virtual class with Air Class, and it's on air cargo, and it's called Workshop on How Air Cargo Works. So can you just tell us very shortly what it's about and who should benefit from it the most?
Sure. Yeah. So this workshop is very much a bird's eye view, a very high level approach and perspective from where the shipment kind of originates to how it kind of goes through the various processes and people and companies in order to essentially get to the end user. So origin to destination, yes, but also a little bit beyond that in terms of the relationships that need to happen between the companies in order to kind of go through those motions. So the course is very much aimed at people who are new to the industry, people who haven't really had much exposure to the industry. So understanding how it all fits together, you know, how this jigsaw puzzle gets in place to provide this lovely smooth transaction is really helpful. I think thinking back to my time when I first joined the industry, I think it would have been really helpful to have that piece of knowledge, just to understand the flows and the connections. And that helps people, and I'm sure that would have helped me as well, to be able to do my piece of that puzzle even better. Because when you have an appreciation of what happens before you or what happens after you, or even like what's the problem, you know, what's the purpose of all of this? You know, why am I getting involved in this? All of a sudden you get the engagement in what you're doing. You know, even if the piece that you're doing is, you know, that big in the grand scheme of the whole picture, when you turn up to work knowing that if I didn't do this piece, then this wouldn't happen, all of a sudden you turn up differently. You know, you show up and you do your piece of work because you know that it's contributing to something bigger. So it's for people who don't really know very much about the industry, are new to the industry, are maybe thinking about joining the industry and just want to know a little bit more about how it fits together. But also, I would say, even people who maybe have been in the industry a long time, but perhaps have only really seen it through their eyes, you know, only really seen it through their perspective. But are thinking about, oh, maybe I could have a go at that, or maybe I could kind of branch out and have a go at that piece of the process. Perhaps it would be really helpful for them to understand as well, you know, the whole chain of events. Yeah, I think it's got quite a broad audience in that sort of sense, but definitely kind of that high level approach.
That's good stuff. And if we're talking about A to Z of air cargo, what do you think is usually overlooked or forgotten when people talk about air cargo? Well, you know, it's shipments, is you know, bringing a package from point A to point Z. But is there anything that usually is forgotten and you kind of feel like it shouldn't be that way?
Oh, that's so interesting. Is there anything that's forgotten? I suppose it's about, I don't know whether it's forgotten, but I think people perhaps don't have a deep appreciation for what happens at each stage. Because, you know, if you're already in the industry and doing what you're doing, of course you don't have time to look through the eyes of somebody else and go, oh, this is what they're doing, and this is the challenges that they're having, and these are the difficulties that they're having, and actually if I did this, then maybe it'll make their life a bit easier and make the whole process a bit smoother. I think what this course gives is an appreciation of what happens at each stage for somebody who's in it already or somebody who's new to it. So what can be overlooked sometimes is I guess the struggles that other departments might be going through, or the detail and the things that they have to contribute in order to make everything happen. Because if you're only concentrating on your bit, you don't have the time to think about that. You know, I read something really interesting on LinkedIn the other day. I hope it's all right to kind of go into that. And the company had a process a scheme, I suppose, where they walked in each other's shoes. So what that meant was somebody would go and spend a day with somebody else who is outside of their department in a completely different area of the business, and literally walk with them. They literally like live their day. And that sort of exposure gives somebody the appreciation and the knowledge of the detail of what is going on in that person's day. So this example was somebody, I think it was a truck driver. So somebody in an office, possibly even the chief exec actually, went and followed the chap around who was actually driving the truck. And all of a sudden you get this massive awareness around, oh, so I've got to sit in this truck and it's actually quite hot and it's a hot day and I've also got to do this and I've got to tick all these bits of paper and I've got to drive it and I've got to stand in a massive queue of trucks and now I've got to get how would you ever get that feeling or that understanding of what it is like for this human being and what they're going through in their job unless you see it through their eyes, or unless you spend some time trying to see it through their eyes, through having an appreciation of what else happens throughout the chain. And I think those sorts of exposures, those sorts of pieces of time where you're able to do that, brings up so many brilliant questions. Like, actually, why don't we do it like that instead of doing it like that? Because often the person that's doing it all of the time, they don't have the time to sit there and go, oh, maybe I could do this a little bit better, because they're so deep in and entrenched in the process. Whereas when somebody comes with a bird's eye view who's a little bit detached, all of a sudden they can see 10 points where they can make the process 50% more efficient without really necessarily changing a huge amount of things. So I think what can be overlooked sometimes is the struggles that people go through in their own departments and the time that is required in order to be able to look at those struggles and essentially make them disappear. So by having a more kind of a broader picture of what happens along the whole process, it helps you to appreciate, okay, what's happening over there? Okay, what's happening over there? Okay, what is it that I can do to make this place and this place easier and better in order to make all of our lives easier and better, and essentially make the customers' lives easier and better?
It's a bit of reflection that is needed to kind of improve your own team, your own processes, and then the others as well, right?
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm saying. I guess reflection is so powerful, but often we don't have enough time to do it because we're too busy doing the task. So it's, and again, I heard something really interesting the other day. I'm digressing a little bit. I hope that's okay. But I heard something really interesting the other day, which was we are human beings, not human doings. So we're very busy doing, we're very busy doing the task or ticking the paper or, logging this. But actually, why? What is it that we want to be? How do we want this organization to be? How do I want to be as a human being? How do I bring myself into my role, into my particular company? And all of a sudden, when we understand what we want to be, then all of a sudden the doing can be so much more powerful, so much more powerful. So I suppose if you give yourself the time to reflect, as you say, to understand, why am I doing this? What do I want to be as an organization? Who do we want to be? Then the doing follows that, rather than the doing just taking this momentum of, well, we're doing it because that's how we've always done it. Well, actually, why have you always done it that way? Perhaps there's a new way because technology has moved on, life has moved on, the pandemic has showed us different things about ourselves. So let's ride on the back of those positive ways.
Well, this is all very interesting. I would love to expand on it more, but let's go back to air cargo a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I actually also kind of went through the internet and I found your article. It was from years ago, but I found it quite interesting because you mentioned there that compared to other aviation sectors, air cargo is still catching up. That's what you said, but they're still behind in terms of passenger business and all the other things. And even though I know many years have passed since that article, do you think that air cargo is still catching up, or is it now the industry leader?
I suppose within that article, what I was talking about was digitization, and I think we have made some progress and strides towards getting rid of paper, I suppose, and trying to get a bit smarter with how we can use technology to make things smoother. and that's brilliant. You know, there've been definitely startups into the industry who have enabled us to now click and book things rather than have to hang on to call centres and call like 20 different airlines before we can get a price and then realise actually I should have gone with the first one, you know. So I think that there's definitely been strides in the right direction with that. Is there more we can do? Definitely, of course there is. There's always more you can do. You know, it goes back to the forever learning thing, doesn't it? I think we can definitely do more in terms of digital. We can definitely do more in terms of supporting our leaders to be even better and more effective leaders, supporting our people to be able to get the best out of them. I think often within our industry, people get promoted up the ranks and they find themselves, you know, on Friday part of the team and Monday leading the team with no support to do that. You know, all of a sudden I'm now managing everyone, but actually I've not been given the tools to understand what my new job requires of me. So I think there's a lot more that can be done in terms of people support, in terms of leadership support, because at the end of it, your leaders are trying to get the best out of your people and processes. And if they're not equipped, then how do we expect to be able to juice out the most from everybody? And give them the support that they deserve, right? You know, I think people come into the industry, people come into all sorts of industries with the fire and enthusiasm to want to give and to contribute, and then fizzle out, I suppose, if and when they're not supported. So I think we need to catch up in that sense. We definitely need to learn from other industries who have already realised that there's huge benefit to be had by having some people investment in that sense, and even particularly with the pandemic, you know, unfortunately a lot of people had to be let go because of the volumes decreasing at those times, but now we look to re-recruiting people within the industry and people coming back on board, and some of those people have never been in air cargo before. So how are we going to support them? You know, how do you get an excellent business? Well, that's with excellent people. You know, if you had two businesses and they both had a plane, what's the difference? The difference is the people, right? So company A, company B, you both got an asset, but what you're going to do with it, and what you're going to do with it is how your people are going to respond. You know, how your salesperson's going to turn up, how your middle management's going to manage the rest of your team, how your leadership is going to show up. So that's something that I think we can get smarter on and learn from other industries who've already benefited so much on. But the good news is, from where I'm sitting, I think there are companies who have realised this and are reaping the benefits of it already. It just needs to kind of now disperse into the rest of the industry.
I think it all kind of nicely comes together, you know, you saying that we need to now hire new people with new ideas and new passion. And then there's your course that can help those people to better understand what they're getting themselves into. But my last question would be, obviously, you know, let's say someone who's watching now this interview, they're thinking, okay, so I want to go into air cargo. I think I have great ideas. I think I know what I need to do to make this industry better. Do you think that change is easily applied, or does it require much more effort than we would particularly, you know, expect?
Yeah, I think it's always possible, right? I think look, if you've got fire inside of you and you've got ideas inside of you, the world will not change if you keep them inside of you, right? You know, in whatever industry or in whatever walk of life you're in, you know, the world deserves to hear what you have to say. So, of course, there's a way of saying it, there's a time of saying it, you know, all of that sort of thing needs to be considered too. You don't just necessarily, you know, throw yourself into arms into a boardroom meeting and say, "Oh, hey guys, listen to me." You know, of course, there's a way of doing it, but I think, you know, if you have ideas, that's how change happens. You know, how did we get iPhones? Well, somebody came up with an idea at some point and went, hey, maybe we should try this. You know, how do we have electric cars today? Well, somebody came up with an idea and said, well, maybe we should try this. You know, ideas are wonderful, and I think that they need to be kind of presented and cultivated and spoken about. And I think also there's an element of well, perhaps if it falls on deaf ears, or perhaps if it's not necessarily chiming with the people around you, well, be curious about that. You know, but there's a way of also taking the feedback, right, about an idea, to say, well, okay, well, how else could it be done? Or perhaps there's another way, or, okay, well, what is the blocker? Because maybe I didn't think about the blocker, but now that I know about this blocker, well, how could I now put that into my idea and make it work even better, or recognize it? So have conversations, you know, and eventually, when you get enough people that kind of go, oh, okay, well, that's an interesting thing, then all of a sudden, you know, it might go somewhere. I mean, you know, the best example is the Harry Potter books, right? How many times did she have to knock on doors to be able to get her books published? And now what, they're at the core of children's storytelling, or, you know, maybe that's a bit dramatic, but I think that I think that, you know, if you have ideas, if you have some fire inside you, bring it to somebody. You know, talk to your managers or whoever, your colleagues, or whatever it is, or even if this industry half excites you or fully excites you. You know, I think get involved and find a way of applying yourself. I'm a massive believer that we all come with talent. You know, we all come with probably multiple talents, and it's just about finding a way to bring that to the world. You know, whether that's through your organisation, through your hobbies, whatever that looks like. But talking more specifically about work here, you know, if you have something to say, then bring it. But also be open and be curious about receiving feedback. So it's a two-way process. And we spoke about resilience earlier as well. There's an interesting thing I was reading the other day, and it spoke about, you know, if you knew that you'd be rejected 10 times before your idea would be accepted, then you wouldn't be as disappointed the first time you were rejected, because you'd go, oh, it's just the first rejection, that's okay, I'll just go to the next one. You know, but there's something about learning from a rejection, or, and rejection's a harsh word, from learning from feedback, let's say. You know, when you bring an idea and if somebody goes, tried that, didn't work, okay, well, you go back, you sit back, what is it about that can't work? Okay, well, maybe if I really believe in this, if I really think it's got legs, well, maybe there's something that I can tweak about my suggestion, and then go to version 2, and then go to version 3. And then eventually, maybe by version 10, there you go, we've got something.
I think that's a beautiful way to end our conversation, with this kind of inspirational note. And Sadiya, I'd like to thank you for taking your time in your day and sitting down with me and speaking, you know, your thoughts and sharing your experiences. I hope this was as interesting as it was to me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And all of my tangents. So thank you for that. And yeah, I really look forward to helping and supporting people through training, through coaching, through however it is that I'm able to bring myself to those spaces. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and our viewers, if you want to take your first steps in becoming the gurus of air cargo, please do consider taking virtual class by Sadiya. And if you just go to ourclass.org, you can find it there, and you will get a chance to learn. You can ask Sadiya questions, you can get feedback from her. I mean, what can be better? So until then, I'd like to thank you again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next Expert Talk. Bye-bye then.